the Age of Fission radio show with your host, Lonnie Clark. We stand together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. From 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Vision radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear.
Good morning, UCY.TV radio listeners. I hope you're well. My name is Jerome, and I am the Sane Environmentalist. Welcome to the Age of Fission radio show for May 17th, 2018. It is 8 a.m. on the East Coast, 8:02 now, or West Coast, excuse me, and we're looking at kind of a cloudy, cool morning here in Eugene, Oregon. So today, being Thursday, I figured I would start out with our new weekly thing to do, which is to look at the current event notification report from the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission. I like to look at this in conjunction with another report, which is called the Reactor Status Report, which tells you exactly, lists every single nuclear power reactor in the country and at what percentage it is operating at. Real very simple chart, but telling. You know, you can go down the list and see, there's some way we're operating at, let's say, 52 or 33%. That would indicate that reactor, if a reactor can only go at 30%, it should be shut down, in my opinion. Oh gosh, it's so sick, we can't keep it at anything more than 30%. Well, you need to shut it all the way down then. That's once again placing precedence of dollars and cents over people's lives and safety. That's exactly what that is. Yet another example of. So let's go through the events for today. This is a report for May 17th, 2018. At the top of the list, we have the Farley Power Plant. This is in Alabama. The event date was 3/26/2018, interestingly, but they're just, and the last update was 5/16/2018. So on March 26th, they had to scram this reactor because one of the main steam isolation valves became inoperable. Now, in a nuclear power plant, if you aren't able to move steam around, you can't move heat around. If you can't move heat around, then you're reactor overheats. Removing heat is the number one thing you need to do, because that's the one thing they're creating is heat from this nuclear chain reaction. An immense, amazing amount of energy, and they're only using the heat portion of it, and not very efficiently at that. They lose like 70% of the heat that they produce with the nuclear chain reaction. Think about that. Only about 30% of the actual energy, of the actual heat portion of the energy, is actually utilized. The rest of that energy is lost. So while at 100% power, Farley Unit 1 conservatively declared, that's a strange way to put it, conservatively declared a single main isolation valve inoperable on the I-1C steam generator line due to indication of steam generator pressure rise with a corresponding reduction in the flow of that loop. The Farley Nuclear Plant Reactor 1 began shutdown to establish plant conditions to support testing the affected main steam line, while in the required action time of technical specifications such and such, testing confirmed that the single valve was inoperable and the valve disassembly will be required. The duration of the valve repair would exceed the required action time of technical specification 3.7.2. This report is being made in accordance with 10 CFR 50.72b2I as a plant shutdown required by technical specifications. Next one, we have the Weyerhaeuser Corporation in Washington. Safety equipment failure. Stuck shutters on 2 gauges. During a periodic inventory check at the Columbia Falls MT location, I'm not sure what the MT stands for. Something testing, materials testing? Must be the Columbia Falls Materials Testing Location. The facility radiation safety officer discovered that 2 unmarked SHF1 source holders had inoperable shutter mechanisms, and that both cesium-137 sources, 10 millicuries and 50 millicuries, are in areas where exposure to the source is minimized by their inaccessible location. So it sounds like the safety shutters on these they radiate whatever for testing purposes with cesium-137. So they've got 2 little jars of cesium-137 and probably a lead shutter over it, depending on the kind of radiation that they're trying to go for, and the shutter door wouldn't close. And so but they're like, oh, it's okay because it's back in a corner. It's hard to get to. Funny thing about radiation is it doesn't matter to radiation. It gets out. You don't have to get to it. Alrighty, next we got another power reactor, the Vogtle in Georgia. Non-emergency fitness for duty. Okay, here we got. So on May 16th, Southern Nuclear Operating Company determined a non-licensed contractor supervisor, this was a supervisor, had a confirmed positive for a controlled substance during a random fitness for duty test. The employee's unescorted access to the plant has been suspended. Fascinating. Ooh, look at this. Arkansas Nuclear in Arkansas. They call this a non-emergency, but what I'm seeing says automatic reactor trip due to loss of main feed water pump. Okay, let's see what this reactor, this is the Arkansas Nuclear Unit 1. The reactor tripped due to the B main feed water pump line was at 10% power and escalating. So they were turning the system on, and the main feed water pump tripped and just turned off. And they lost feed water to the reactor, just like that. They were at 10%. So they were bringing it up, and in the main feed water line, the pump just tripped. So, and this is very complicated to read. I'll just give you one sentence. This is why they do this intentionally to make it more difficult for laymen to understand what's going on. EFW experienced a half trip on the A train of the emergency feed water initiation and control at time of system actuation, but was successfully actuated manually immediately upon discovery. Train B, EFIC, actuated in automatic as designed. The half trip of the A train, EFIC, is currently believed to be associated with the EFIC channel 3. However, investigation is underway to verify this. If you weren't a nuclear engineer and knowledgeable about what is an EFIC, what do they mean by half trip? I don't know. That's so much gibberish. But if you were a nuclear engineer, it would be immediate. So now they have auxiliary feed water in service, and heat removal is via turbine bypass valves to the condenser. No radiological releases have occurred due to this event. And there's no effect on Arkansas Nuclear Unit 2. So let's go to our little list and look for Arkansas. Arkansas Nuclear 1, 0%. As of right now. Arkansas Nuclear 2 is pumping away at 100%. Let's see some of the other ones that look really sketchy to me here. The Davis-Besse plant running at 88% is not good. The Fermi Unit 2 is running at 63%. Not good. 74% for Farley 1. 86% for Browns Ferry 3. 9 Mile Point 2, 33%. That is just sick reactor. It should not be running. Fitzpatrick at 52%. All those reactors, if you live near any of those reactors, keep your eyes open. Because they're sickly. They wouldn't be running them at 50 or 60 or 70% or 30, even worse, if they weren't pretty ill. If they weren't able to safely do it, they would, because it's all about dollars. They should be shut down, but because of the greed of the nuclear industry, they continue to run. They continue to run and generate what little bit of money they're able to generate, after the high cost of them. It's really kind of silly. So we spend all of this energy, money, and manpower and human lives on a technology that wastes literally 90% of the energy it produces and causes furthermore death and destruction and long-term poisoning of our very DNA. The destruction of our gene pool is what we're looking at with this technology. And the 90%, I've said it before, if you could efficiently 100% harness the energy from a nuclear power, all the energy, not just the heat energy, you could power the planet, on a very small amount of material. But we just don't have the ability to do that. We are not evolved to the point where we're able to do that. we ran into this, discovered this. Einstein figured this out somehow. How? And again, I get back to how do we get from there to here so quickly, too? You know, we went from there was nothing but natural background radiation and no need for a Geiger counter to polluted in a matter of 60 or 70 years. And now we've got all these piles of waste, and they're going to get out too. And there's, for the hundreds of thousands of years that it's going to take for these materials to become undangerous to our DNA, hundreds of thousands of years. Keep in mind, folks, that the whole history of mankind is less, in our opinion, than 12 to 15,000 years. The whole history of humanity is about 15,000 years. The oldest Sumerian stories and etc. You know, the Great Pyramids are probably older than that. But I'm thinking that our entire history is but a drop of time in comparison to one half-life of plutonium. One half-life of plutonium is 10 times greater than the entire recorded history of humanity. Yet we continue to create it, and more and more of it. You know, and we spread it around. I'm learning now that the government bases radiation, cancer incidences, and radiation-induced cancer, the ones that come from radiation, they got their information by studying what happened at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And they're tracking people, many of them now dead, but they're still tracking the ones that are alive. And so they're basing their cancer incidence material, let's call it, or estimates, and therefore the responsibility of nuclear for various cancers on information that they got from the blast victims of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Now, there's a big difference between Hiroshima and Nagasaki and what's going on here with this low constant exposure. Hiroshima and Nagasaki was a blast of radiation. Zap! And then it was not completely gone. There was still residual radiation, of course, but overall it dissipated and went away. And people had that one big blast to their DNA. And and they found an increase in thyroid cancers and other cancers, you know, blood cancers, bone cancers, etc. And so they based what would happen if you're exposed to radiation on that, not on, okay, I've got it, I got a piece of plutonium lodged in my house somewhere, and it's constantly hitting me with alpha, and I got cuts here and there, and it hits me in the eye, and it goes in that way, and I've gotten various low-level X-rays technology. I personally had a process done called a kyphoplasty, where basically they rebuild a vertebrae in your back. They take a needle into a fractured vertebrae, and they inject a little balloon in there, and then they inflate the balloon. And by inflating the balloon, they push all the bone cage structure out to where it needs to be. It's no longer crushed in. And then they inject cement into the bone area, and it hardens almost instantly. And then they deflate the balloon and pull it out. During this entire procedure, they have to look at you under a live X-ray. And so you receive steady dose of x-rays during the time of the entire procedure. I remember the skin on my back being burnt, like a sunburn. And I remember them having to put some kind of cream on it to calm the burn down. It really hurt. The burn was more painful than the procedure. So yeah, we get a lot of radiation. And I think that we need to reevaluate where we're going with this, where we're going with our cause and effect, and the whole culture behind the cause and effect. We've got to look at reality as to reevaluate what, now that we have some evidence. We have evidence from around the Hanford area. We have evidence from around 3 Mile Island. You can go right down the list of just about every nuclear power facility on the planet. You can look at the cancer rates there. You know, I found a very interesting site. It's called statecancerprofiles.cancer.gov. And it allows you to look to CDC's website, and it allows you to look at states. And here, let's just look at and see what the incidences of cancer are, and if they're on the rise or on the wane over a given period of time. So let's look at Washington, state of Washington. All cancer sites, all races, both sexes, all ages. I'm going to generate a table. And falling, stable. In various counties. Interesting. So it looks like cancer is stable or falling. Mostly stable, though, in Washington State. There's a way to make a map. Generate table, make a map. Here we go. So you can make a map of whatever state. And I'm looking at incidences, a number of incidences, and they are very much higher to the west and the south of Seattle and the Puget Sound, mostly to the south. They're elevated around the Hanford area, for sure. And once you get over to the east side of the state, they're actually a lot lower. So the farther west you go, the higher the rates are. Very sad. So let's look at Colorado. There's another good one that's got lots of sites. Colorado, Connecticut. Colorado counties, all rates, all races, both sexes, all ages, 5-year average, generating a map. Let's see what we got. Oh gosh, we got some increases here. Interestingly, that the highest rates of cancer in Colorado are basically right along the Front Range, and also in the northwest section of the state is slightly elevated, but it's mostly right along the Front Range, up and down between Pueblo and Denver. High levels. And let me ungenerate a map. Generate a table. Export data table. Here we go. See if that works. Stable, 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 falling, rising in Routt County. Cancer rates are rising in Ouray and Routt County. Pitkin County. Wow. Ouray, Rifle, Pitkin, and Jefferson County. Which is stunning to me. Jefferson County and those counties are right up where I was just talking about. You know, Jefferson County is where I was telling you guys about Commerce City, right outside of Denver, which is kind of like the it used to be an industrial zone where they had the dog food plant and the dump and all that stuff, and they reincorporated into a small city, and they've been very, very, very poor. And it's a sad thing because they've been taken advantage of because of that. You know, and it is just terrible. So another big issue, and let's swing back up to Hanford again, and exposures generally speaking. So this soup at Hanford, this tank waste, they call it euphemistically, soup, is a slurry of every deadly thing you could possibly imagine. Mostly, and there might be a little water in it, but I would think that the water would get ionized into other things. I don't honestly believe that water is stable enough to exist as water in this soup. It would vaporize or ionize almost immediately. You know, if you throw water in acid, it fizzes up and goes away. Water does not really mingle well with acid unless you really put a lot of it in there. You know, and given that these tanks are isolated the way they are, at least I hope, from rainwater, then you're not going to have a lot of water. And I know that they were not using water to spray down the processing equipment and tanks in between doses of plutonium production. I know they weren't, because water can cause criticality in plutonium. You don't want water. They don't like water. That's why they use solvents and other things, acids, solvents, things like that don't cause criticality to occur. Don't moderate neutrons, basically. So that's the problem with water and nuclear. Water moderates neutrons. It slows down neutrons, and that can cause interactions, and it increases the cross-section of whatever is in the water so that it can capture neutrons more easily because the neutrons are going slower. So I'm not buying that they're evaporating water, because the first step is like, oh yeah, it's evaporation. This is what they say. First we're going to pump it out of those old tanks and into our pretreatment facility, into the 145 million gallons worth of tanks we have in this pretreatment facility. And then we're going to evaporate it to get the water out. That's what they're saying. We're going to evaporate it to get the water out. Remove the water. And at first I was like, evaporating the water out, right, okay. Then I got to thinking, hold on. Hold on. And so I thought, this stuff can't be that. You can't evaporate this stuff. This is a crazy thought. So you're going to evaporate this stuff right to the atmosphere? It's in an enclosed tank for safety, yet you're going to use evaporation techniques. Let's say you're going to, in a closed loop, evaporate it. You're going to evaporate it and somehow try to recapture the liquid or filter it, or I'm not seeing that. The whole idea of evaporating it is to reduce the volume and to change the consistency of the material so that it becomes thicker and more of a sludge, so that you can then vitrify it more efficiently. It's got less liquid in it, so it's not going to have to boil as long, because I imagine as soon as you drop it into the incinerator, any vapor, any volatile organic stuff, any volatile compounds, any petroleum products will almost immediately go with flash to either steam or some kind of soot. Okay, so do you see where we're starting to go here? A good portion of that waste is in the liquid component of it. Okay? And I would say a minimum of 40% is in this liquid component, in this volatile component. And so this volatile component, you can't classify. You can't. It's got to be evaporated or burned off or something. And my question is, so where is it going then? It may not be radioactive, it may be just chemicals, but these are chemicals, and let's look at them. This is from the HanfordChallenge.org/chemical vapor exposures. And the title of the little article is called Chemical Vapors 101. At least 120 workers were exposed to chemical vapors at Hanford since 2015, 73 of which occurred in April and May of 2016. Over 18,000 chemicals have been documented in the vapors contained within Hanford's tank headspace, which escape from the tanks through various pathways. According to the tank farm contractor documents, at least 120 Hanford workers in and around the tank farms were exposed to toxic vapors since January of 2015. 73 workers experiencing a vapor exposure in April and May of 2016. Some of these individuals are still experiencing negative health effects from the exposures. Workers exposed to toxic vapors have suffered long-term health effects, including brain damage, lung diseases, nervous system disorders, and cancer. Short-term health effects have included nosebleeds, profuse sweating, persistent headaches, tearing eyes, burning skin and lungs, coughing, sore throat, eye problems, dizziness, nausea, memory loss, difficulty breathing, and increased heart rates. Some workers are on long-term disability resulting from chemical vapor exposure at Hanford, with illnesses such as toxic encephalopathy, neurological damage, nerve damage, and lung disease. Others are still fighting for their claims to be recognized. A 1997 Pacific Northwest National Laboratory found that cancer risks from exposure to tank farm vapors carried a fatal cancer risk as high as 1 in 10. So we're at 4 in 10 naturally, so make that one more. So that's 50%. So the people who were exposed to this vapor have a 50% chance of getting cancer in their lifetime because of the exposure to this vapor. Given the general overall, it'll put you over the edge. Instead of 4 in 10, it'll be 5 in 10. The vapor exposure controversy is historical. In the early 1990s, numerous oversight investigations were conducted by the U.S. Department of Energy, Congress, and the Inspector General after 16 exposure incidents took place over a 4.5-year period. The resulting reports found gross mismanagement and potentially criminal activity in failing to protect workers from known hazards. In 2006, CH2M Hill issued a report titled Industrial Hygiene Chemical Vapor Technical Basis. Hanford Challenge reviewed this report and raised several concerns. Hanford Challenge and CH2M Hill, both members of the Hanford Concerns Council, brought these concerns forward for an independent review that resulted in a 2008 report. As a result, the key findings exposed doubt about the credibility of vapor sampling data and concluded that the protective measures being used were not conservative enough to protect workers. In 2014, in response to dozens of toxic vapor exposures resulting in medical symptoms and illness, Hanford commissioned an expert panel led by the Savannah River National Lab. That report's first key conclusion was that the body of testimony and data examined by the team strongly suggests a causal link between the chemical vapors from the Hanford tank waste and subsequent adverse health effects, particularly upper respiratory irritation experienced by many Hanford workers. The TVAT report found these workers' exposures were to be dramatic and essentially instantaneous events. dramatic and essentially instantaneous. Remember yesterday when I was saying all you have to do is just one breath of this stuff. Dramatic and instantaneous. That were consistent only with acute exposure. So basically what we're dealing with here is some very, 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 very nasty chemical vapors that one breath is enough to make you sick for the rest of your life. Millions of gallons of this stuff. And it seems to me what they're thinking about doing is just putting it into the atmosphere. They're gonna evaporate it. That is horrifying. You know, I doubt you can find it, but do a search for Rocky Mountain Arsenal. I believe it was Basin F, which is now buried over, but Basin F, and how they evaporated the chemicals out of this Basin F, and it sickened people all around there. And this was in Commerce City. Hey, what do you know? Yeah, Commerce City. The residents of Commerce City were right next door to the Rocky Mountain Arsenal. And as I said yesterday, the Rocky Mountain Arsenal is where they made nerve gas and Agent Orange and DDT. And they ended up with a big giant tank, a sludge pit, basically. And so they basically flung it into the air. They flung it into the air to dry it out. And all of those vapors just went right into the air and went right straight downwind into Commerce City. And they made people so sick. Years later, people are still sick from that. You know, but Shell didn't pay a dime. Nobody ever acknowledged that the people in Commerce City have been poisoned. You know, except the people who live there, but nobody's listening to them. You know, and that's part of the nuclear taboo. That's how we are. Assets on a balance sheet. You know, that's how if you are somebody who lives near one of these sites, you literally are enslaved by the corporation. You are at their leisure. You know, if they decide to be lazy one day, well, guess what? You're gonna be the one to suffer for it. You know, if you live in Richland, Washington, I would be very concerned about this. Anywhere around there, I would be very concerned about this, that they're going to literally evaporate this stuff. Millions of gallons of it right into the air. They must be. I cannot think. Why evaporate it just to recapture it? It makes no sense. You know, and what they've got is they've got to separate this stuff out. And another thing, they're talking about separating the high and the low level waste. Like, that's just something you can do. You can take this bucket of sludge, okay, and go, okay, high level waste to the right, low level waste to the left. Go on. I mean, how are you going to, it's a mix. The whole thing is a mix. And so basically, I think it's kind of crazy. They must have some magic way of separating the two. I don't know how it is. Maybe they're in different parts of the tank. Maybe some tanks have higher level waste and some tanks have lower level waste in them. From the actual tank farms themselves, some of the tanks there have a higher or lower level of radioactivity. It kind of makes sense that would be that way. That they would concentrate the radioactivity in a few of those big double shell tanks. So, you know, that's the number one thing. How do you separate the high and the low? And then once you do, you got to get the water out of it, right? Water, euphemistically. And you're taking these chemicals which cause nosebleeds, sweating, headaches, tearing eyes, burning skin and lungs, coughing, sore throat, eye problems, dizziness, nausea, memory loss, difficulty breathing, and increased heart rates. And then under acute exposure, you get encephalopathy, neurological damage, nerve damage, lung disease. They're going to be pumping these right into the atmosphere, where they will float wherever they go. And again, dilution is a solution to pollution, isn't it? And how much of that really is going to be radioactive? And how can we really trust these contractors to do this right? They've got a literal black box that they're building, and it's not working, and they know it's not going to work, but they're being stubborn, and they're trying to finish. If we just finish it, then we'll get paid. Doesn't matter whether it works or not. We just got to finish it. We had a plan. We had a design. We have engineers. We have a system, and it's discovered 2/3 of the way in that it's not going to work. But if we do that, if that's the case, then we aren't going to get paid. So we're going to finish it. And that's what they're doing. They're finishing it because, damn it, that's what they set out to do. Whether it works or not, they're going to finish it. And when they do, they will fire that puppy up and it will fail. And when it does fail, you're going to end up with tanks and tanks of sludge and half evaporated sludge. And they know that. Okay, they know that. And so that's why they're thinking, well, maybe with the low-level waste, what we can do is we can just send it directly to the vitrification process. So what they're thinking is they're going to bypass pretreatment altogether and just try to take this waste out of the tanks and vitrify it. So probably they're thinking that their melting furnace will actually, if they add it slow enough, maybe it will act like a evaporator. And so all of that crap will go out those stacks, and pull out your Google Earth and go to the Hanford site and find that area. It's all the way to the right side of the site where it looks like there's two half demolished giant buildings. Those are the pretreatment plants, and the little pretty green roofed ones around those are the actual glass vitrification plants. And you'll see they have a big stack each, and that stack will send out a plume of all of these chemicals, now burnt and oxidized, into the atmosphere at a couple 100 feet up in the air, so that they will go a really far distance before they fall out. They're literally creating fallout. Not nuclear fallout, chemical fallout. So, goodness gracious, folks. I get at this, generally about this point in the hour, I start to think to myself, what am I even, how do we do this? How do we fight against this? You know, especially when you're up against such a monopoly of control. There is no way to get control for us. It is a monopoly. You know, the oligarchy runs the nuclear industry through their various contractors. Governments around the world think they're in control of it, perhaps. I think many of them know they are not in control of it, that somebody else has the keys, you know. And we, the people, are basically just assets on a balance sheet, subject to liquidation. You know, let's call it liquidation. So as assets on a balance sheet, we are literally subject to liquidation. We could be liquefied, to put it euphemistically. You know, I don't like the idea of being a disposable asset on somebody's balance sheet. That's why I'm fighting this battle. Because if enough of us stand up, then we will not be assets on a balance sheet. You know, we will be individual people with rights and dignity and a stake in this planet, a real stake, which gives us ownership. We have to take ownership. That's what we're doing. We've given away ownership to a oligarchy. It's like, well, okay, it's this magic thing. I get power through a wire, and I guess that's good enough for me. I'll pay my bill and not worry about it. You hear lots of stories, but I've never gotten cancer from radiation. So that's it. We have literally allowed the control of our world to be taken over. And some of the most important things to be compromised, and that includes our safety, our health, the health and welfare of our great-great-grandchildren. And once again, keep in mind, these products last longer, 10 times longer, just half-lives. The half-life of plutonium is at least 10 times longer than the entire recorded human history on this planet. If you go all the way back to some of the ancient cave paintings and stuff, okay, like what would that be? 250,000 years ago, 240,000 years ago, or 100,000 years ago? That's still not even one half-life of plutonium. So in the time it took us to get from cavemen to where we are today, the plutonium we've created will still, 50% of it will still be here. And it will have, and then there's another kind of a euphemistic thing about plutonium is people think, well, half-life and then it goes away, right? No. And then it decays into something else, which has an even longer half-life, lower radioactivity, but even longer half-life. So we're dealing with universal powers and looking at it in a primitive way, as would a caveman boiling water. We've got the power of a star, and we use the energy, just the heat part, to boil water. Yet we consider ourselves to be somehow advanced, an advanced civilization. Well, I would say that nuclear fission is an advanced concept, but how we utilize it is not advanced. It's a travesty of the power that is contained within it. What do we use it for? The first thing we thought of was blowing stuff up. Well, that's an enormous amount of energy. Think of what a big explosion it could make. That's what went through the minds of the guys in the Manhattan Project. We have to harness this power so we can blow stuff up. That's the nature of humanity, is we are primitive in our mindset. Basically, we never got much beyond the lizard. The basic animal is still right there. We are not, as a species, an evolved, I don't know what to call it, to a higher level of existence, of an understanding that of cause and effect, and with a vision of what our actions are going to create in the future. Kind of like the prime directive, Star Trek. Basically it's not just do no harm. It's even if there is harm being done, you can't do anything about it because you don't know what effect you're going to have on the course of the evolution of this, whatever it is, this group of people. Like they, more than once went in and in a act of heroism saved somebody from an oppressive enemy on a planet. And it turns out, oops, that was a mistake, because now look what evolved in it. And we created this situation. And now what are we going to do with it? And so that's why they came to the conclusion, after messing enough stuff up, that we have to just stand back and let the natural course of events occur. And that is a certain wisdom. That is a societal wisdom. That is a spiritual trend, if you would, that goes through the hearts and minds of an entire civilization. It changes the way that civilization thinks about its own impact on the world around it. Our civilization, we don't think about the impact of our actions. We think about our next meal and our shelter and our job and our life and our families and children. We aren't really thinking about the impact that we're going to have on the children of somebody that comes down the road 3 generations or 4 generations. We don't have a prime directive that says do nothing to affect future generations, basically, except hand off good, healthy DNA to them that they can work with. Because we don't know the direction humanity is going to go. I fear that we are going to go out with a bang, and I think we have before, and I think we will again. I think that we've gotten blasted. I think that our society is much more long-term than we think it is. I think that the whole, it's 6,000, recorded history of 6,000 years, and so before then there was really nothing. And we were a bunch of ape-like cave people. And I think that you can actually go back a couple, 300,000 years and probably find modern humans that were doing things, and also, and lately, and this is off topic, but I'm going to go there anyway because I can, and we're almost at the end. But there's a science fiction series. It's called Stargate. And the premise of Stargate is that there is an advanced alien culture, and they have access to this technology. They actually didn't invent it, but they found it, and they have access to it. And the technology is called a Stargate, which allows you to instantly go from one place to another over whatever distance without any vehicle. It just takes you from here to there. They call them Stargates. And this civilization came down, and basically they built the pyramids as landing pads for their gigantic pyramid-shaped starships. And they posed as gods to the primitive humans on Earth. And according to the timeline of the show, that is how the ancient Egyptians occurred. That's how the pyramids were built. It was all a advanced alien culture that came to this planet, posed as gods, and thereby were able to control the population of the planet and extract resources from the planet, which is basically what you need if you've got a pyramid-sized spaceship. So, of course, that's just conjecture, but it is an interesting idea, that because the pyramids, if you look at a lot of the structures in the Gaza Plateau specifically, they do not resemble tombs. They resemble big industrial machines, and they've got. It makes sense that all of that was part of a bigger program that was a very advanced highly technical thing. And we may have had flying cars and the whole thing, and there was an asteroid impact, and boom. And over a couple 100,000 years, everything gets erased, and then you restart again. And here we are again. Second round. This time, are we going to blow ourselves up? Are we going to poison our DNA to the point where it's not even recoverable again? I don't know, folks. What do you think? Do people like me have an ability to change the course of humanity? Do people like me have the ability to create a swell, if you will, a groundswell of humanity on a higher level, which is looking at the long term instead of just looking at next week or my lifetime? You know, we need to give beyond our lifetime. We need to start thinking about how are my actions going to affect the people that I don't know, won't know, and never can know, because I'll be dead. But they will undoubtedly be here, and I am responsible for leaving them an environment that they can live in. You know, now is that smart? Yeah, I think that's smart. You know, and but is humanity following that? No, we are not. We are not. We're moving along in a blissfully unaware manner, pumping out our waste and pumping out our radiation, and creating pockets of it all over the planet that will spread out and will even out. And we think our societies and everything are just so all that, you know. But the United States is what, 216 years old or 220 or something like that years old. That's just like a speck of time. That's a speck of time. Don't get your high hats on, and remember that every major civilization that has ever existed on this planet has crumbled and fallen. So what is our heritage? What is our legacy going to be after that? Is it going to be the United States that created the poisoning of the entire globe? Because it was us. We came up with it. I mean, we're the ones who employed it first. And right after World War II, after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we decided that we were not going to share any nuclear secrets with our allies. And so everybody had to figure this stuff out for themselves. They knew it would work, but they had to figure it out for themselves. And they did. You know, and so you've got 57 different flavors of process that went into creating all the various fission devices that we have on our planet. And you can call a nuclear reactor a fission device because that's what it does. It fissions uranium and plutonium now. So we are at 8:58. And how many seconds? 13 seconds. So I want to give a shout out to Lonnie Clark, my co-host and good friend. As well, I would like to give a shout out to Jules for all her hard work and UCY.TV. And again, hello to all the radio listeners at KEPW 97.3 FM in Eugene. That's Eugene Peaceworks Radio. Serving the underserved and everybody who needs it. And I think that's a really great thing. So I will be back tomorrow with Lonnie Clark. And like I said, look forward to upcoming changes. Things are always changing, aren't they? And 7, 4, 3, 2, 1, goodbye.